Title: Desperate mother faked her own death to escape an abusive husband, but her daughter married him 15 years later. The night Ngozi decided to die, she was sitting on the cold bathroom floor of a one-room apartment in Mushin, Lagos, with a swollen eye, a broken lip, and her 3-year-old daughter sleeping on the other side of a thin wall. She was not actually going to die. But she needed the man in the other room to believe she was gone forever. Because if she stayed one more month, one more week, maybe even one more night, she was certain that she actually would be. Her name was Ngozi Adaeze. She was 26 years old. And she had spent the last 4 years of her life learning what it feels like to vanish while still breathing. Emeka had not always been this way. That is what made everything so confusing. When she first met him at her cousin's wedding in Surulere, he was the kind of man that made aunties nudge each other. Tall, well-dressed, spoke with confidence, laughed with his whole chest. He brought a chin-chin and zobo in a plastic cup and said, "A woman like you should never have to stand in a line." Her mother said he had good manners. Her father shook his hand twice. The whole compound said what a lucky woman Ngozi was. And she believed them. She believed them on her wedding day. She believed them through the first year. She even believed them on the night he first raised his hand and then held her and cried and said it was the stress from work, it would never happen again, he swore on his mother's grave. It happened again. And again. And again. By the time their daughter Adaeze was born, Ngozi had learned to read Emeka the way market women read the sky before rain. The way his voice dropped when she spoke too long in front of his friends. The way he chewed slowly when the food was not ready at exactly the time he expected. The way the veins in his neck rose when she laughed at something he did not find funny. She had memorized every warning sign, every dangerous silence, every moment that meant she had 30 seconds to change something before the whole evening collapsed. She had become an expert in surviving her own home. But then Adaeze started walking. Adaeze was 14 months old, still wobbly on her small legs, and one evening she toddled toward Emeka's chair and knocked his bottle of beer off the side table. The bottle didn't even break. It just fell and rolled slowly across the floor. Ngozi watched Emeka's face. And in that moment, she did not think about herself. She thought, I cannot let this man teach my daughter that this is what love looks like. That night, after Emeka was asleep and snoring heavily the way he always did after drinking, Ngozi sat in the dark with Adaeze on her lap and made a decision. She had no money of her own. Emeka controlled everything. She had no family in Lagos, her people were in Anambra, and Emeka had quietly and carefully made sure she had no strong relationships there anymore. Phone calls home became arguments. Visits became impossible. Even her closest friend from secondary school, Blessing, had been frozen out after Emeka decided Blessing was a bad influence. Every normal escape route had been blocked. Slowly, carefully, the way a man builds a prison, one rule at a time. So Ngozi thought of something else entirely. There was a woman named Mama Chisholm who lived at the end of their street. Mama Chisholm had worked at the local government office for 30 years and knew how paperwork moved and how paperwork could be made to disappear. Ngozi had once helped Mama Chisholm during a very dark season, sat with her through 3 nights when her husband was in the hospital, cooked for her children, never asked for anything back. Now Ngozi went to her with one request. She needed to be dead. It took 11 days. A document. A report of a woman who fell into the Lagos lagoon on a rainy evening near the 3rd mainland bridge. Body swept away, never recovered. The kind of story that Lagos swallows without asking too many questions. Emeka would be notified. There would be a record. And Ngozi Adaeze would simply cease to exist. She chose a Thursday. Emeka was on a trip to Port Harcourt for work. Adaeze was with their neighbor Mama Tand, who had 3 children of her own and a big heart and had watched Ngozi with quiet worried eyes for 2 years without ever saying what she suspected. Ngozi packed one bag. She took Adaeze's hospital birth card. She took the small photograph from their wedding, not because she wanted to remember the marriage, but because Adaeze's face was in the background of that photo, round and new and perfect. She took her own mother's wrapper, the one that smelled faintly of the Anambra compound she had grown up in. She left everything else. She stood at the door for a long time. On the table she left a note. Not dramatic. Not emotional. Just enough to end the story cleanly. I am gone. Do not look for me. Then she walked out into the thick Lagos night and did not look back. She did not cry until she was on the overnight bus to Ibadan, watching the Lagos skyline disappear behind her. And then she cried the way a person cries when they have been holding something for 4 years and finally put it down. The woman sitting beside her, a fat, warm woman with a headscarf and a bag of garden eggs on her lap, pressed a piece of folded tissue into Ngozi's hand without a word. Some kindnesses do not need explanation. Here is what Ngozi did not know when she walked out that night. She did not know that Mama Tan would panic when Ngozi never came to collect Adaeze. She did not know that Mama Tan, frightened and confused, would call Emeka in Port Harcourt. She did not know that Emeka, sharp and calculating even in shock, would use that moment to build a story. A story in which Ngozi had not escaped a violent man. A story in which Ngozi had simply abandoned her child. Walked away. Left her daughter without looking back. She did not know that Adaeze would grow up believing her mother had chosen to leave her. Ngozi settled in Ibadan. She changed her surname to her grandmother's maiden name, Okafo. She found work washing clothes for a woman in Bodija who owned a big house and asked no personal questions. Later, after years of evening classes at a community learning center, she found work as an administrative clerk at a private hospital in Dagby. She lived quietly, carefully, like someone who had learned that visibility was dangerous. Every year on Adaeze's birthday, she sent a small, unmarked envelope to Mama Tan. Inside was never money, she was afraid money would raise questions. Inside was only a folded piece of paper with one question written on it. Is she okay? Is she safe? Mama Tan always sent back something short. She is fine. She is growing. She is with her father. Ngozi told herself that was enough. She told herself a mother who stayed away was better than a mother who stayed and got killed. She told herself that every morning. She told herself that on every birthday she spent alone. She told herself that on every Christmas, every New Year, every random Tuesday afternoon when the grief came without warning the way grief always does. Most days she almost believed it. Adaeze grew up in the same Mushin apartment where her mother had once learned to disappear. Emeka was not the same man after Ngozi left. Or perhaps he was exactly the same man, and without Ngozi as his target, he redirected himself. He became calmer, more controlled, almost gentle with Adaeze. He was strict in the way that people in that neighborhood call discipline. He sent her to a decent school. He attended her prize-giving days. He cooked jollof rice on Sundays and let her watch films on his phone on Saturday evenings. The same compound that had watched Ngozi suffer in silence now called Emeka a strong man who raised his daughter alone after his wife abandoned them. Adaeze believed the story. She had grown up inside it. It was the only story she had. She carried the wound of it the way children carry wounds that have no name. Not loudly. Not with obvious pain. But quietly, the way a bone that was broken and healed slightly wrong aches when the weather changes. Every mother she saw felt like a small reminder of something she had been denied. She did not hate Ngozi. She had decided very young that hatred was too exhausting. Instead she carried something colder than hatred. A flat, settled belief that she was the kind of person whose mother had looked at her and chosen to leave. That belief shaped everything. She became fiercely self-sufficient. She did not ask for help. She did not lean on people. She kept her inner life very private and her outer life very organized. She was the kind of woman her colleagues at the marketing firm in Victoria Island called strong and put together and professional. She was also the kind of woman who mistook control for love. Because when you grow up watching a man who is both your protector and your authority, you stop knowing the difference between the two. Safety and control wear the same face when that is the only face of love you have ever seen close up. She met Bayodan when she was 24. He was 39. He was a businessman. A property developer with an office in Lekki and a reputation for knowing exactly what he wanted. He drove a black Prado and dressed well and spoke with the kind of quiet authority that made people in rooms pay attention without knowing why. When he looked at Adaeze, he looked at her the way a man looks at something he has already decided belongs to him. She thought that was love. She had never been properly taught what love was supposed to feel like. They courted for 7 months. He introduced her to his family in Abusive. Her father Emeka approved enthusiastically, shook Bayodan's hand with both hands, and said, "This is a man of substance." The introduction was done at Emeka's compound. The bride price was paid without argument. Neighbors came and ate and said what a lucky woman Adaeze was. She believed them. the way her mother had once believed them. The first year of their marriage was comfortable. Bayodaan was not a shouting man. He was not the kind of husband who threw things or used his hands. Let nobody misunderstand, he never raised a finger. But he was the kind of husband who made decisions and announced them afterward. Who reviewed her phone in the evenings with a casual ease that made questioning it feel unreasonable. Who had opinions about which of her friends were suitable and which ones were, as he put it, not the kind of woman a man's wife should be spending time with. He did these things gently. Almost kindly. As though he was doing her a favor. 2 years into the marriage, Adaeze sat in her car in the parking lot of a ShopRite in Lekki and cried for 30 minutes because she had bought the wrong type of rice and she was genuinely, physically afraid to go home. She sat there in that parking lot and something broke open in her chest. She drove to the public library on Overlower Road instead of home. She sat at a table in the corner and opened her laptop and typed words that her mouth had not yet learned how to say. And she read for 2 hours. Every word on the screen felt like someone had been watching her life through a window. She drove home with a plan that had no shape yet. Just a small, terrifying, fragile awareness. She called her one trusted friend, a woman named Kemi who had grown up on the same street as Adaeze and had watched this marriage with worried eyes from the beginning and had been waiting, patiently and quietly, for Adaeze to see what Kemi had seen since the introduction ceremony. Kemi held her hands across a small table in a pepper soup joint off the island and said, "Ada, I know. I've been waiting. Tell me what you need." What Adaeze needed first was to understand her own past. Because something had cracked open, and now she found herself looking backward at things she had never questioned. She started asking Emeka different questions about her mother. Not the surface questions she had asked as a child and accepted the prepared answers to. Deeper questions. Uncomfortable ones. Emeka's story had never changed in 20 years. Your mother was a troubled woman. She left one morning and never returned. She chose her freedom over her own child. That is the kind of woman she was. But now Adaeze listened with different ears. She noticed how smoothly her father told it. How every part of the story was clean and ready before she finished her question. How there was never any sadness in it, never any confusion, only this perfect arrangement of events where Emeka was entirely innocent and her mother was entirely without conscience. She thought about Bayodaan and how he also always had a clean and ready explanation for everything. She went to the local government registry where her birth had been recorded. She found a death report for a woman named Ngozi. Filed in the same year her mother disappeared. Drowned near the 3rd mainland bridge. Body never recovered. She stared at that document for a very long time. Then Kemi connected her with a man, not a formal private investigator. Lagos was not that kind of simple, but a man named Mr. Femi who had been a journalist for 15 years and knew how to find people who did not want to be found. He charged her 60,000 naira. It took him 3 weeks. What he brought back to her changed everything. Ngozi was alive. She was living in Ibadan. She worked at a private hospital in Dagby. She had been alive for Adaeze's entire life. Every birthday. Every graduation. Every night Adaeze had cried alone believing she was the kind of child whose mother had walked away. Her mother had been alive this whole time. Adaeze did not call. She could not call. She got on a bus from Ojota Motor Park to Ibadan on a Saturday morning. 4 hours. She sat with her bag on her lap and the piece of paper with the address in her hand, and she did not sleep and she did not eat the kela the bus conductor offered her. She found the street. She found the house. A small compound with a painted blue gate and a neem tree growing at an angle in the corner. She sat on a concrete block across the street for almost an hour before her legs agreed to carry her forward. She knocked. The woman who opened the gate was 50 years old. She had the kind of face that had seen serious things and survived them and kept that knowledge quietly behind the eyes. She had grey at her temples and she was wearing a faded Ankara blouse and she was holding a bowl she had been using to sort beans. The bowl fell. Beans scattered across the compound floor like small brown stones. The woman said one word. Adaeze. And Adaeze, who had prepared herself for this, who had rehearsed being cold and composed and demanding on the entire bus journey, felt 20 years of something break apart in her chest all at once. She said, "You are alive." Ngozi stepped forward with shaking hands. "I am alive. I am sorry. I am so sorry, my daughter. Please let me explain. Please." They stood in the gateway of that small compound. mother and daughter. Strangers who shared the same nose, the same hands, the same careful way of holding themselves that they had both developed separately, in different cities, for different reasons. And then Adaeze stepped inside. They talked from afternoon until the compound went dark and Ngozi's neighbor came out to ask if she should bring a lantern. Ngozi said yes. They sat under that lantern in plastic chairs in the middle of the compound and Ngozi told her everything. The 4 years. The way it started. The way it built. The night she decided to leave. Mama Chisholm and the document and the bus to Ibodo. The birthday envelopes to Mama Tan every year with the one question folded inside. Is she okay? Is she safe? She told her about the answers that gave nothing and everything. She told her, there was not one morning I woke up without thinking about you. Not one prayer I said that did not have your name inside it. Adaeze sat across from her mother in the lantern light and felt two impossible things at the same time. A grief so wide she had no words for it, for every year that had been taken, for every moment she had needed a mother and believed she had been abandoned, for the lie she had grown up inside. And beneath that grief, something colder and more frightening. She said quietly, the way you are describing him. Ngozi went still. The things he did. The way he made you feel. Adaeze's voice was careful and slow. I married someone like him. The silence that fell in that compound was the heaviest thing either of them had ever sat inside. Ngozi looked at her daughter's face in the lantern light. And she saw something she recognized from her own mirror 20 years ago. That particular tiredness that lives behind the eyes of a woman who has been managing herself around a man for too long. That careful way of choosing words. That flinch beneath the surface that a person learns to bury so deep they forget it is there. She set down her cup. She reached across and took her daughter's hand. Tell me everything, she said. And Adaeze did. They talked until the compound was completely quiet and the only sounds were nighttime sounds, generators and distant music and the occasional bark of a dog somewhere on the street. And when Adaeze finished talking, Ngozi did not give a speech. She did not offer a quick answer. She simply held her daughter's hand for a long time in the dark. Then she said, we will figure this out together. You are not alone anymore. It took several months. Kemi helped. Mr. Femi helped. A lawyer named Funk who had spent 10 years handling exactly these kinds of cases helped. Ngozi came to Lagos twice, quietly, and met with them in Kemi's sitting room in Surulere with the curtains drawn. Because it turned out there were things about the original death report that did not hold together under examination. And a lawyer who looked carefully at the original paperwork found enough to raise serious questions, not just about Ngozi's disappearance, but about the pattern of events surrounding it and the man at the center of them. Emeka had built his story carefully for 20 years. But a careful story and a true story are not the same thing. And some truths, no matter how much concrete is poured on top of them, eventually push through. The morning Adaeze walked into the lawyer's office to begin her divorce from Biodan, Ngozi was sitting beside her. The morning the questions about Emeka were formally raised, Adaeze was sitting beside Ngozi. They did those things together. Side by side. The way they should have been able to do everything. Adaeze moved out of the Lekki apartment on a Wednesday morning while Biodan was at a site inspection in Oja. She took what was hers and left what was his and did not write a note. She went to Ibodan that same evening. She did not rent an apartment immediately. She stayed with her mother. She slept in the second room of that small compound under a ceiling fan and woke to the sound of her mother already up and moving in the kitchen, and for the first time in her entire adult life, she did not feel like a woman waiting for something to go wrong. They had hard conversations. Many of them. There were evenings where they sat across from each other in silence because some things were still too bruised to touch. There were nights when Adaeze cried in